The taxi pulled up to the curb, and for a moment, I thought the driver had made a mistake. There was a moving truck in my driveway, not Daniel's truck, a rental one, orange and white, its ramp lowered onto the grass I had mowed myself every summer for 31 years. 2 young men were carrying my porch swing, the one Joseph built the year our daughter was born, toward the back of that truck like it was nothing but lumber. "Ma'am?" the driver asked, watching me in the mirror. "This the right address?" I did not answer him right away. I was looking at my own front door, painted the blue I had chosen after my husband passed, because he always said he'd get around to blue and never did, and I wanted to finish something he started. There was a wreath on it now, not mine. Yellow ribbons, fake sunflowers, the kind of cheerful thing you'd buy at a big box store on your way to move into a house that wasn't yours. I had been discharged from St. Vincent's 40 minutes earlier, 6 weeks after they wheeled me in with fluid in my lungs and a heart that had decided, without asking me, that it wanted to slow down and quit. 6 weeks of tubes and monitors and a ceiling tile I had memorized down to its water stain, shaped like a hawk if you looked at it long enough. 6 weeks of my son promising me every single visit that everything back home was fine. I paid the driver with shaking hands and stepped out onto the sidewalk in front of the house my husband and I built board by board in 1979, the house where I raised Daniel and his sister Mary, the house I was born again in every spring when the lilacs came up along the fence line. A woman came out onto my porch, young, maybe 30, wearing my porch light like it already belonged to her evening. She saw me standing there with my hospital discharge folder still clutched to my chest, and her face did something complicated, confusion, then worry, then something closer to fear. "Can I help you?" she asked. "This is my house," I said. She looked back over her shoulder, toward the open front door, toward whatever life she and her family were carrying into my rooms. "I don't understand," she said. "We closed on this house 19 days ago. I want to tell you, before I go any further, that I did not scream. I did not curse. My grandmother used to say that dignity is the one thing they cannot take from you unless you hand it over yourself, and I was not going to hand mine over on my own front lawn to a stranger holding a box of dishes that used to be mine. But my knees went soft, and I sat down right there on the porch steps my husband had poured the concrete for, and I thought, someone is going to have to explain this to me. And I already had a terrible feeling about who that someone was going to be. A man came out behind the woman, wiping his hands on his jeans, the kind of tired that comes from carrying boxes since sunrise. He introduced himself as Ryan. His wife was Beth. He looked at the discharge folder in my lap, then at my hospital bracelet still cinched around my wrist because nobody had thought to cut it off before I left, and something in his face shifted from irritation to alarm. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need us to call someone?" "I need someone to tell me why there are strangers in my house," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, which is a trick I learned a long time ago and have never forgotten how to use. Ryan looked at Beth, Beth looked at the ground, and in that silence, the particular silence of 2 decent people realizing they have stepped into something they don't understand, I understood that whatever had happened here, these 2 had not done it to me on purpose. Whoever had done it to me had done it to them too, in a different way, wearing a different kind of damage. "We have paperwork," Beth said quietly. Would you like to come inside and sit down? You don't look well." I did not want to sit down in my own kitchen as a guest, but my legs were not giving me much of a choice, and some part of me, even then, sensed that I was going to need every ounce of strength I had for what was coming, so I let her help me up the steps I had walked 1,000 times on my own. My name is Helen Greywolf. I am 73 years old. I was born on the reservation, raised by a grandmother who could read weather and the way birds moved, and could set a broken bone as well as any doctor in the county clinic 40 miles away. I met my husband Joseph at a powwow when I was 19, and he built me this house with his own hands, learning carpentry from a book because his father hadn't lived long enough to teach him. We raised 2 children in that house. Mary, my daughter, who moved to Portland for nursing school and stayed, calling every Sunday like clockwork, sending photos of her own daughter riding a bicycle for the first time. And Daniel, my son, who never left, who I thought, foolishly, that closeness meant safety. Joseph died 11 years ago, cancer, the kind that takes its time, so you have to watch every stage of the leaving. After the funeral, Daniel came to me and said, "Mom, I'm not going anywhere. This is your house, and it'll always be your house, but I'm right here if you ever need me." And for a long time, that was true. He mowed the lawn when my hips started acting up. He drove me to my appointments. He fixed the gutters every fall. I was proud of him, the way you are proud of a child who turns out to be the kind of adult who shows up. But showing up and being honest are not always the same thing. I know that now. Daniel had married a woman named Karen about 8 years back, and I liked her well enough, though she had a way of looking at things, my house, my furniture, my late husband's tools in the shed, like she was doing inventory. I told myself that was unfair of me. Grief makes you suspicious of people who are only being practical. What I did not know, what nobody told me, was that Daniel's construction business had been bleeding money for almost 3 years. Bad contracts, a partner who disappeared with a down payment on a project that never got built, Karen's mother needing expensive care in a facility 2 towns over. I found all of this out later, piece by terrible piece, the way you find out the ice is thin only after you're already standing on it. What I knew at the time was smaller things. Daniel visiting more often that last year before my hospital stay, bringing up the future in conversations that used to be about football scores and grandchildren, asking once in a voice too casual to be casual whether I'd ever thought about getting things in order just in case. I told him I had a will. I told him the house went to him and his sister equally when I passed, split down the middle, and that I intended to be difficult about dying for as long as humanly possible. He laughed when I said that, but it wasn't his real laugh. I'd known that boy since before he had teeth. I know his real laugh, and that wasn't it. I should tell you a little more about this house, because you cannot understand what it meant to lose it without understanding what it took to build it. Joseph and I started with nothing but a plot of land his uncle sold us cheap because nobody else wanted it. Too rocky, too far from town, too much work to clear. We lived in a trailer on that land for 2 years while Joseph learned framing from library books and a neighbor who used to be a contractor before his back gave out. I mixed concrete in a wheelbarrow while I was 6 months pregnant with Mary because we couldn't afford to hire it done. Every board in that house we earned twice, once with money we didn't have and once with the kind of labor that leaves a mark on your hands for the rest of your life. When Daniel was small, he used to sit on Joseph's shoulders while his father hung drywall, handing down tools like a tiny foreman. And Joseph would laugh and call him my little contractor. And I think some part of Daniel carried that title his whole life like a promise, even after Joseph stopped saying it. I think, looking back, that Daniel never separated the house from his father. To lose the idea of one day owning it was, to him, something close to losing Joseph all over again. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it helps me understand the shape of the desperation that got him there. The warning signs, looking back, were never loud. They were quiet, the way water finds a crack in a foundation quiet, the way you don't notice the damage until the wall is already leaning. There was the afternoon maybe 8 months before my hospital stay when I came home from the grocery store and found Daniel in my kitchen with a folder of papers spread across the table. He closed it fast when I walked in, too fast, the way a child hides a report card. "Just some paperwork for Mom's health directive," he told me, though I hadn't asked, "in case something happens and you can't speak for yourself." I did sign something that day. A power of attorney, he called it. Limited, he said, only for medical decisions, only if I couldn't make them myself, only temporary. I trusted him the way you trust your own child, which is to say, without reading every line, because some part of you still believes the 8-year-old who used to fall asleep against your shoulder in the truck could never grow up into someone who'd hurt you. I want to be fair to my son here, because fairness matters more to me than anger ever will. I do not believe, even now, that Daniel woke up one morning and decided to steal his mother's house. I believe something much sadder happened. I believe a desperate man convinced himself of a story that was easier to live with than the truth. The story he told himself I would learn was this: that years earlier, back when Joseph was still alive, his father had promised him the house one day, had said it in the casual way fathers say big things to sons over a beer on the porch, meaning something and nothing at the same time. Daniel had turned that porch conversation into a kind of scripture in his mind. He believed, or made himself believe, that somewhere in the legal tangle of documents I'd signed, the power of attorney, an old estate planning packet from years back, papers about the property he barely understood, his name was already on the deed, that the house was, in some sense he never questioned closely enough, already his. He was wrong. It never was. My name, and only my name, was on that deed, the same as it had been since Joseph and I paid off the last of our mortgage in 1996 and held a little bonfire in the backyard to burn the paperwork, laughing like fools, young enough still to believe the hard part of our life was behind us. But Daniel didn't shake. Desperate men rarely check the things they're afraid to find out. I collapsed in my garden on a Tuesday morning in May, weeding the tomatoes, and the next clear memory I have is 3 days later, waking up to a nurse adjusting a line in my arm and a doctor telling me the word congestive in a tone that made my stomach drop before I understood the rest of the sentence. 6 weeks, that's how long St. Vincent's kept me. Pneumonia complicated everything. Then my heart needed watching. Then there was a scare with my kidneys that turned out to be nothing, but still cost me 11 more days of monitoring. I want you to understand what that felt like, lying in that bed, the boredom of it, the fear underneath the boredom, and the one thing that kept me steady through all of it was thinking about my house. My kitchen with the yellow curtains Mary sewed for me, my garden, my husband's tools still hanging in the shed exactly where he left them because some part of me could not move a single wrench without feeling like I was erasing him. Daniel visited every week, sometimes twice. He'd sit in the vinyl chair by my bed and tell me the lawn was fine, the house was fine, Ruth next door was keeping an eye on things. Don't worry about anything, Mom, just get better. He was lying to my face the entire time, and I never once suspected it, because that is what trust does. It makes you slow to see the thing that's right in front of you. There was one visit, about halfway through my stay, that I keep returning to now, turning it over the way you turn over a stone to see what's living underneath. I asked him, out of nowhere, whether he'd watered my tomatoes. He said yes. I asked whether Ruth had been feeding the birds like I usually did. He said yes to that too, fast, the way you answer a question you haven't actually thought about because you're thinking about something much bigger and much heavier sitting behind it. I remember thinking at the time that he looked thin, gray around the eyes in a way that worried me. I asked if he was sleeping. He said the business had him stressed, that was all, nothing for me to worry about. I should focus on getting better. I held his hand that day. I told him I was proud of the man he'd become, steady and reliable, nothing like the wild teenager who used to sneak out his window to go fishing before sunrise. I meant every word of it. I had no idea that on the other side of that hand I was holding, a decision had already been made, papers already drafted, a closing date already on a calendar somewhere I would never see until it was far too late to stop it. My roommate in that hospital, an older woman named Doris, recovering from hip surgery, used to tell me I was lucky to have a son who visited so faithfully. Some of the other patients on our floor barely had anyone come at all. I remember agreeing with her, feeling that particular warm pride you feel when someone else notices what you already believe about your own child. I think about that conversation often now. I think about how certain I was. I think about how certainty is sometimes just fear that hasn't found its reason yet. The house sold on a Thursday. I was still in the hospital, 3 days from discharge, running a low fever that had the nurses worried about a lingering infection. While I lay there watching that hawk-shaped water stain on the ceiling, my son sat across a closing table from a young couple named Ryan and Beth Anders and signed away the only home I had left in this world, using a power of attorney I had signed to authorize medical decisions, not property sales, and a set of old estate documents he had misread or chosen to misread into permission he never actually had. He told the title company he had authority to sell. He told Ryan and Beth that his elderly mother was moving into assisted living and wouldn't be returning. He told a story with just enough true pieces in it, my age, my hospitalization, my hip trouble, that nobody thought to look closer. Nobody except me, sitting on my own porch steps with a discharge folder in my lap, staring up at a stranger's confused, frightened face. Ruth from next door was the one who finally told me the truth, because Daniel wasn't answering his phone and Karen wasn't either, and Beth Anders, to her credit, and I want to say clearly that this young woman did nothing wrong here. She was as much a victim of my son's desperation as I was. Beth sat me down at her own kitchen table, in my own kitchen, and made me tea while her husband called their real estate agent in a low, urgent voice from the next room. "He told us you'd already moved into a care facility," Beth said, her hands wrapped around her own mug like she needed something to hold on to. "He had paperwork. He had a lawyer present at closing, or someone he introduced as one. We paid full asking price, Mrs. Greywolf. We have 3 kids. We sold our old house to buy this one. We don't have anywhere else to go either." I sat in that kitchen, my kitchen, with my yellow curtains still hanging in the window, because apparently even a man selling his mother's house out from under her couldn't bring himself to take those down, and I felt something in my chest that was worse than the pneumonia had ever been. Not anger yet. That would come. First, there was just a terrible, hollow disbelief, the kind that makes the whole world feel like a stage set that could be folded up and carried away at any moment. Ruth had more to tell me once Beth stepped outside to give us privacy. She'd seen the moving truck 3 weeks back, Daniel's this time, his actual truck, hauling things out of my garage in the early evening while I was still 2 weeks from discharge. Tools. Joseph's tools, a trunk of my mother's beadwork that I hadn't looked at in years, but that I would have died before selling. I asked him what he was doing, Ruth said, her voice careful, the voice of a woman who had liked my son for 20 years and was now realizing she might not have known him at all. He said he was storing things for you, getting the house ready to sell so you could downsize into somewhere easier to manage. He said you'd asked him to handle it. I had asked him no such thing. That night, I stayed at Ruth's in her spare room because I no longer had a room of my own to stay in, and I lay awake with my heart doing the same unreliable stutter that had put me in the hospital in the first place, and I thought about all the ways a person can lie to themselves until the lie feels like the truth. Ruth sat with me for a long while before I finally managed to sleep. She'd lived next door to us since before Daniel was born, had brought casseroles to Joseph's funeral, had watched my grandchildren grow up from her own porch. She was as heartbroken as I was, maybe more, because she trusted Daniel too, had handed him a spare key years ago in case of emergencies, had led him into that garage without a second thought because he was the boy she'd watched ride his first bicycle down that very street. I keep asking myself what I missed, Ruth told me, twisting a dish towel in her hands like she could wring an answer out of it. He seemed the same as always, tired maybe, but the same. That's the thing about a man drowning quietly. He doesn't always look like he's drowning. Sometimes he looks like he's just having a hard week. The next morning, Beth came by Ruth's house with a folder of her own, copies of everything Daniel had shown her and Ryan during the sale, a notarized letter supposedly from me stating my intention to sell and move into assisted living. My signature was on it. I stared at that signature for a long time because it was close enough to fool a stranger, but I knew every loop and slant of my own hand, and that was not mine. Someone had traced it or copied it from an old document or gotten close enough with practice that it passed a glance, but not a mother's certainty. I need you to know, Beth said, sitting across from me at Ruth's kitchen table with her hands folded like she was in church, that we asked to meet you before closing. We wanted to say goodbye to the woman who'd lived in the house, tell her we'd take care of the garden. He told us you were too frail for visitors, that the transition upset you, that it was kinder to let you settle into your new place without more strangers around. I believed him. I am so sorry. I believed every word. I reached across the table and took her hand, this young woman who had done nothing wrong except trust a man who had run out of good choices. I told her, "You have nothing to apologize for. You were lied to just as much as I was. We are going to figure this out together." I called Daniel 41 times over the next 2 days. He answered on the 42nd. "Mom." That was all he said at first. My name, flat and small, like a man who has been dreading a phone call for weeks and finally has to answer it. "You sold my house." I had rehearsed calm. I did not manage calm. My voice cracked in the middle like old wood. There was a long silence, and then he started talking fast, the way people talk when they're trying to outrun their own guilt. He said the business was drowning. He said Karen's mother's care facility was $11,000 a month and climbing. He had meant to tell me. He had meant to talk to me the whole time. He just kept waiting for the right moment, and the right moment never came because I kept getting sicker instead of better. And then he said the thing that broke something open in me, something I don't think will ever fully close back up. "Dad told me the house was going to be mine one day. You know he did. I thought it basically already was mine in every way that mattered. I thought I was just handling something that was already decided." "Daniel," I said, and my voice had gone very quiet, the way it does right before I say something I need him to actually hear. "Your father talked about a lot of things over a lot of beers on that porch. He talked about buying a boat. He talked about retiring to Arizona. None of that made those things real. The house has my name on it, only my name. It has had only my name on it since before you were old enough to understand what a deed even was." "That's not, Mom, that can't be right. I saw papers." "You saw a medical power of attorney that you used to authorize a property sale it never once mentioned. You saw an old estate planning folder from a lawyer we visited 11 years ago when your father was dying that outlined what would happen to the house after I passed, not while I was very much alive and in a hospital bed." "I didn't check," he finally said, and his voice had gone very young, very small, the voice of the boy who used to sleep against my shoulder. "I was so scared, Mom. Everything was falling apart, and I convinced myself. I don't even know what I convinced myself of anymore." I learned more about the pressure Daniel had been under from Mary, who flew in the moment I called her with the news and spent an evening on the phone with Karen Pfister, piecing together a fuller picture than Daniel himself had been willing to give me. Karen's mother had suffered a stroke 18 months earlier and needed round-the-clock memory care, a cost that ate through the family's savings within a year. Daniel's business partner, a man he'd known since high school, had taken a $40,000 deposit from a client for a project in another county and simply vanished, leaving Daniel to answer for a debt that was never his to begin with, but that his name was legally attached to all the same. Karen had been pushing him for months to do something about the house, not fully understanding, Mary suspected, exactly what that pushing would eventually drive him to do. None of that made what he did acceptable, but it helped me see the shape of the trap he'd built for himself, one bad month layered on top of another until the walls closed in enough that a lie started to look like the only door left in the room. Here's the twist that the lawyer explained to me 2 days later, sitting in an office that smelled like old coffee and new carpet. Because Daniel never actually held the legal authority to sell my house, because the medical power of attorney I'd signed explicitly excluded real estate transactions, and because the estate documents he leaned on were plans for after my death and not instructions for while I was living, the sale itself was never valid in the first place. Not partially invalid, not complicated. Void, the lawyer said, using a word that felt strange and clean after weeks of feeling like everything solid in my life had turned to smoke. The title company had made an error, too, one their insurance would have to answer for, failing to catch that the power of attorney didn't authorize what Daniel claimed it did. That failure was actually good news in its strange way, because it meant Ryan and Beth Anders, who I had come to feel a real tenderness toward, two frightened young people caught in a mess that was never theirs to begin with, would be made whole by the title insurance policy protecting their purchase. They would get every dollar back. They would not lose their home twice in 1 year. The lawyer, a patient woman named Miss Alvarez, who had a way of explaining things without making me feel small for not already knowing them, walked me through exactly how the paperwork had failed everyone involved. The medical power of attorney I'd signed 8 months earlier contained a single line excluding real property transactions, standard language, she said, meant to protect elderly clients from exactly this kind of situation, though it had clearly done nothing to protect me in practice. Daniel had either not read that line carefully or had convinced himself it didn't apply to what he considered, in his mind, an inheritance already promised, rather than a sale requiring my consent. The estate planning documents were worse in a different way. They were plans, contingencies for after my death, drafted with Joseph's old lawyer the year he was dying, back when we were both trying to put our affairs in order so our children wouldn't have to untangle a mess while grieving. Those documents named Daniel and Mary as equal beneficiaries of the house, but only upon my death, with language a first-year law student could have parsed correctly. Daniel had shown a photocopy of those documents to the title company, along with the medical power of attorney, and somehow, through carelessness or willful blindness or simple understaffing at a busy title office, nobody had caught that neither document authorized what he was claiming authority to do. In plain terms, Miss Alvarez told me, your son never had the legal right to sell this house, which means the sale itself never legally happened, no matter how many signatures are on that closing paperwork. The title company's insurance exists precisely for situations like this one. They failed to catch an error they should have caught, and now they're financially responsible for making the Anders family whole. And I would get my house back. My kitchen with the yellow curtains, my garden, gone a little wild in the weeks it had sat empty, my husband's tools, which Daniel had not sold after all, only stored in Karen's mother's garage, too ashamed, he admitted later, to actually go through with getting rid of them. But knowing the law was on my side didn't touch the part of this that actually hurt. My son had walked into a room and signed away my home while I lay in a hospital bed believing every word he told me. That kind of wound doesn't close just because a lawyer uses the word void.
Daniel came to see me 2 weeks later at Ruth's house, since I still wasn't back in my own home yet. There were papers to finalize, locks to change, a strange grief to process even in getting something back. He looked like he hadn't slept in the better part of a month. Karen didn't come with him. I found out later she'd moved back in with her sister, that the marriage was cracking under the weight of everything, and while I take no joy in that, I won't pretend I was surprised. He sat across from me at Ruth's kitchen table, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me," he finally said. "I'm not going to ask you to. I don't think I've earned the right to ask. You lied to me every week in that hospital. You looked at me while I was fighting to breathe and you told me the house was fine." "I know." "You took your father's tools out of that shed like a thief in the night." "I know, Mom." "You told a young family with 3 children that I had already agreed to move into assisted living. You built a whole story out of nothing so you wouldn't have to tell me the truth." He didn't defend himself this time. He just nodded, his jaw tight, tears finally coming the way they should have come weeks earlier, before any of this happened, back when honesty could have saved us both a world of grief. "Do you remember," I asked him, "when you were 9 and you broke your sister's bicycle trying to jump it over the ditch behind Ruth's yard? You came inside and you told me the truth before I'd even noticed it was missing a wheel. You stood right there in that same doorway and you said, 'Mom, I did something bad and I need to tell you before you find out on your own.'" I remember. What happened to that boy, Daniel? What happened to the one who couldn't stand to let me find things out on my own? He was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee cup slowly on the table, not drinking from it. "I think he grew up and got scared, and scared men don't tell the truth first. They tell it last, after every other option is gone. I kept thinking I could fix it before you ever had to know, pay off the debt, buy back the house somehow, make it so the lie never had to become a thing you found out about at all. Every week that went by, the lie just got bigger, and it got harder to imagine any version of telling you that didn't end with you looking at me exactly like you're looking at me right now. And how am I looking at you? Like you don't recognize me." I didn't correct him because in that moment, it was true. But I want to tell you something my grandmother taught me, something I said to him then and believe with my whole heart now. Not recognizing someone in their worst moment does not mean you have lost them forever. Sometimes it just means you are meeting for the first time the part of them they were most afraid to let you see. "I was drowning," he said, "and instead of telling you, I let myself believe something that made it okay. I made myself believe Dad had already given it to me, because if that were true, then I wasn't stealing anything. I was just taking what was already mine. I know that's not an excuse. I know it doesn't undo any of it.
I sat with that for a long while, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, thinking about my grandmother, about the winters on the reservation when food was short and people still found ways to share what little they had, because desperation is not a new thing in this world, and it has broken better people than my son. "I am not going to pretend this didn't happen," I told him. "I am not going to hand you my trust back like it costs nothing to rebuild. But I have buried a husband, Daniel. I have sat in a hospital bed wondering if I would ever see my garden again. I do not have the years left to spend them hating my own son." He put his head down on that table and cried the way he hadn't cried since he was small enough for me to hold. The Anders family found another house 2 months later, closer to Beth's parents, and she sends me a Christmas card every year now, which still surprises me every time it arrives. Daniel sold his half of the construction business and took a job managing a crew for someone else. Steadier work, smaller stakes, the kind of job that lets a man sleep at night. He and Karen are trying to find their way back to each other, slowly, the way you rebuild a fence after a storm, one post at a time, testing whether it will hold. I moved back into my house in the fall, in time to see the lilacs finish their season and the leaves turn along the fence line Joseph built with his own 2 hands. I hung the yellow curtains back exactly where they belonged. I planted garlic in the garden, the way my grandmother taught me, so it would be ready to pull come the following summer. Because planting something for a future you intend to be alive for is its own kind of faith. Mary flew in from Portland the week I moved back, and together we went through Joseph's tools one by one, oiling the ones that had rusted a little from their weeks in Karen's mother's garage, hanging each one back exactly where it used to hang, like putting a scattered family back into its proper order. My granddaughter, 7 years old now and full of questions, asked me why Uncle Daniel looked so sad at dinner the night they visited. I told her that sometimes grown-ups make choices they wish they could take back, and that the bravest thing a person can do afterward is stay in the room and try to make it right, instead of running from the mess they made. She thought about that for a while, the way children do when you give them something too big to swallow all at once, and then she asked if we could plant sunflowers by the porch. We did. They came up taller than she is now. Daniel comes by most Sundays. Sometimes we talk about the past, carefully, like handling something with a crack in it. Sometimes we don't talk about it at all and just eat dinner together, and that quiet is its own kind of healing, too. He is paying back, slowly, what the title company's insurance had to cover, insisting on it even though the lawyers told him he technically didn't owe a cent since the sale was voided. I did not stop him. Some debts are not about the money at all. My grandmother used to say that the truth is like a river. You can dam it, you can divert it, you can build your whole life pretending it flows somewhere else, but sooner or later it finds its way back to where it was always going, and it takes everything in its path when it does. Desperation makes liars of people who never meant to lie. It makes thieves of sons who love their mothers, but it does not have to make the ending permanent. My door is open to my son the way it always has been, because the wisdom of my people has never been about forgetting what was done to you. It is about refusing to let what was done to you decide who you become. If you have ever trusted someone with something precious and watched that trust get broken, I want you to know you can hold both truths in the same hand. You can be hurt and you can still choose grace. That is not weakness. That is the hardest strength there is. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone before they even finished making things right? I would like to hear your story.